Ladies and gentlemen, I think Wargaming have just messed up on World of Tanks, and it is of course with the release of the Skoda T56, the tier 8 Czech heavy that we knew on PC was going to be a super strong tank, and when it's translated over to console it's remained just as good, and this means that this tank is quite possibly one of the best tier 8 premiums. I've played about, I'd say 10 games in it now, tried to just do it in one day, and we've managed to get two really decent replays for the channel. And to be honest, I played it just as much to be able to get a grips of whether or not this tank really is as good as it is on PC, and with no doubt it really is. And you can do things that only other tier 8s would dream of, because ultimately this thing can be in tier 10 games and you still feel like you can come up against tier 10s and do better than them, knowing full well that you are a tier 8 and you're able to do more damage than them. It just makes this tank so fun to play, because if you just take this tank as a tier 10 that can deal 920 damage in one salvo, it means that effectively you're just a tier 10 that has a little bit less hit points than the majority of the others. You have armour that can even work against tier 10s. You saw there we came up against the FV215B who didn't manage to pen us. The turret of this thing is perfect unless they hit the cupolas, or alternatively they decide to load HE for some unbeknownst reason to me, but oh well, we'll take the reduced damage that the FV215B 183, just standard version here, is actually hitting us for. And you saw there we were able to just smack him for 920 damage and rack up so much damage in such a short period of time. I feel like that's one of my common phrases on the channel, but this one really does just make it so easy for you to just pump out damage. And if you've ever played an autoloader, this is like the dream. This is the ultimate dream of having an autoloader. You're able to pump out these two shots in, what, 3.5 seconds? But if you compare that to any other heavy tank that can deal anywhere near the amount of damage that this one can per shot, it's just above and beyond as good. And I'm calling it right here, this tank is probably a little bit too powerful. It may even be overpowered. You know, I've only played 10 games, we're not going to classify it as being overpowered, but from my personal preference of tanks in the game, and for the skill cap that can be provided by autoloaders, especially ones that don't have a cataclysmic sized reload, so you've only got 20 seconds on this roughly, with all of the perks that can boost up your reload. Yeah, this one is just unbelievable in terms of the sheer amount of damage you can kick out, even in those games where you're tier 10. And for probably 90% of the games, I didn't even have premium rounds in this thing, and I was still able to pen ultimately nearly every single tier 10 tank that I came up against easily through the turret and through and on, well, depending on where their weak points are. But you can see here, when you're coming up against equal tiered opponents, it feels super, like, it feels bad. It feels like a bad for the enemy team, because ultimately they cannot really deal too much damage to you, yet you can just kind of bodger them and badger their hit points out of the way, and that's them over. It just doesn't feel fair, but I don't care. I'm playing this tank, so it doesn't matter how the enemies feel. But I guess from a gameplay balance perspective of you guys who are thinking, oh, I'm not going to purchase this like kind of borderline overpowered tank that Wargaming are selling at 50%, and it's 50% at the minute, and this is probably the best purchase in terms of a competitive tank for the amount of gold that they're selling it for. 50% off, 6,000 gold I believe that this is, and it will go down as they release the better packages. But yeah, this tank, worth it in every sense. And this is where I feel like when you're rebalancing the Draugans in the game, you know that this is probably one a little bit too strong, because ultimately the Draugan is such a fantastic tank, and when you're able to do things like that to the Draugan, where you just make him sit down and you can basically punish them, yeah, this is just the tank for me. And you can see we're in a tier 10 game. I've done 4,000 damage pretty easily, may I say, and we've managed to get 2,000 assistance. It's not like even Wargaming decided, hang on a minute, we've introduced this heavy tank, it's not really slow, it can go 35 kilometers an hour, it can deal 920 damage if you pen both shots, it's got a 3.5 second inch clip reload, which probably isn't the best you'll ever see, but ultimately it has good view range as well, so you're able to spot at tier 8 especially, and you're able to do things that nothing else can do, that especially from a tier 8 heavy. You also have armour that actually works as a tier 8 heavy, which can't be said for very many. You look at things like the Tiger 2, yes, they might have a little bit of armour, but nothing to stand out, but this actually bounces rounds for once. And I think that we'll just showcase the next replay here as we continue our talk. Now the next replay is on Malinovka, and this one showcases, like we just talked about, the speed, and the speed at which this thing can get into position, and of course, as we talked about again, the spotting potential of the tank, because a lot of tanks might be really good at dealing damage and dealing damage on its own. So yeah, you get those tanks that have super high DPM, things like the Tortoise, but they don't really have the potential to get loads of spotting. Yes, you may have the odd game where you have really amazing view range and you manage to be the only one on the flank and you didn't get undetected and you managed to actually spot opponents, but if you want a consistent actual spotting damage in a heavy tank that's going to be able to consistently deal probably in the region of about 4k combined damage as a tier 8, yeah, that's a tier 8, at least for me anyway, then this one is the way to go. And if you have any kind of real need to try to, you know, if you want a tank that you're going to develop your skills in and play World of Tanks, learn the game, then to be honest with you, I think that this pretty much has it all. It's forgiving in terms of its armor model, you'll bounce around, it's got a really good gun that you kind of can learn autoloaders with, you've also got like the ability to move forward, and I just think that it has pretty much everything. Yes, you can take the odd hit, as with every heavy tank in the game, it's not invulnerable as many people would love their heavy tanks to be, but ultimately when you're coming up against medium tanks you feel like the top dog, especially if you're in the same tier as them, because they have such little hit points in comparison to you that you can whack out like 75% of their hit points in one clip, and then you can kind of bounce a few rounds, they don't really have too much on you, and then within 20 seconds you're reloaded to dish out the rest of that 25% hit points in just one shell, when if you miss the first shell of your clip you've got the second that can finish them off. And with the 460 alpha of the tank, it means that you can even trade 1-for-1 with a lot of the heavies on a corner at tier 8 and still do more damage. So you don't even have to play this thing like an autoloader. Like, it's not optimal. If you can fire both shots, then you should be. Don't go thinking, the Eclipse said that you can fire just one. What I mean is, like, if you can, you should fire both. But if you can't, you're still better in a corner fight with most of the tier 8s in the game. Don't go trading with tank destroyers that have like 750, obviously. But yeah, you can still have really good games, and if you know when to reload, if you know when to hit that reload button so that you are fully reloaded for the next opportunity where you think that you're going to be able to get out that 920, then this is the tank for you. Oh, I just love this tank. I think it's going to be super hard for a lot of people to deal with. I think that this tank is definitely going to flood the matchmaker as soon as people start realising how powerful this thing is in the game, and how pretty much, I'm going to call it here, this is like a tier 9 at a tier 8, and yeah, a tier 9 at tier 8 that's a premium. Wargaming kind of selling their souls once again, where they basically, you can pay to basically be better within the game. I don't know, this is the Skoda T56, we all knew that this was coming, we all probably presumed that the tank would be very good. I'm not surprised, 920 alpha in a very short period of time. If that was any other tier 8, you'd know that it's be very good. All I'm saying is that at least it's not super fast to the point where you're doing like 50 in this thing, because then the world would have a truly devastating tank on World of Tanks. But I think that this one in general is a tank that will just perform admirably, where you don't really have to think too much, where you can just go in, where you can basically just be the top on the team. You really can be the top on the team with this tank, and it can be just the tank's fault as well. Like, I'm not claiming that these results are because, you know, I'm an excellent player, albeit, you know, I have played like 24,000 battles, so I do know somewhat of what I'm doing, at least I hope so anyway. But, you know, if you get your hands on this sort of tank with the experience of, you know, 20,000 battles, then you will be able to make it work. And I'm sure many of you have probably played way more than me, so you know exactly how autoloaders work, you know how to use them, and how you can take advantage of them to just be a demon, so to say, and how you can use both the armor model and the tank itself to just perform so well. And you can see here 3.8 thousand damage so quickly. The Emil 2 thinks he's all high and mighty over there as we're just high rolling for 540 damage and 490 in the next one, and pumping our damage total above 1,000 in just one clip. Yeah, not entirely sure that Wargaming got this right. Of course, let me know your comments in the comment section down below, whether you think that they did actually break this tank too hard and that it is just overpowered. Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you purchased the tank, and if you want to see any kind of changes to this tank, what would you do to it? And of course, it earns silver as well, because why not? But thanks for watching. If you want to check out any of the new season news, all of the update information regarding this update that released the Skoda T56, then watch this video on the screen on the left. And of course, if you were interested in this gameplay and you're interested in the new season tanks, then take a look at the gameplay and tanks reviews on the right playlist, which showcases all of the new season tanks within that you'll be able to flick through and find the videos that you're interested in. Thank you very much once again for watching, and I hope I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.